What really happened inside the walls of the Jackson family empire? Because the official story, the one the label wanted you to believe, barely scratches the surface. Tonight, R&B Groove is pulling back the curtain on 10 of the real reasons Michael Jackson left the Jackson 5. And by the time we reach number 1, you will never look at his solo career the same way again. Reason number 10. The contracts that trapped them like prisoners. Most people assume the Jackson 5 were living the dream from the moment they signed with Motown Records in 1969. And on the surface, that looked true. Television appearances, magazine covers, world tours. But behind that shining image was a contract so suffocating, so deliberately written to benefit the label above everything else, that the brothers had almost no real financial control over their own careers. Motown's deal gave the label the power to approve or reject virtually every creative decision the Jacksons made. Song selection, album themes, touring schedules. Even the image they presented to the public was curated, managed, and controlled by the label's executives, not by the family. And the royalty rates? Shockingly low by any standard for every record sold. The percentage that actually filtered back down to the 5 brothers was a fraction of what artists at comparable levels of success were receiving elsewhere in the industry. Now here's what makes this especially relevant to Michael's decision to eventually leave. He was the one carrying the most weight. He was the lead voice, the frontman, the face that appeared on every promotional poster. His face sold the group. But his name didn't control anything, and as he grew older, as his artistry deepened and his ambition expanded, the gap between what he was contributing and what he was receiving creatively and financially became impossible to ignore. He watched this unfold in real time. He processed every detail, he stored every injustice, and every year that passed inside that system, that awareness grew heavier and heavier until it became something he simply could not carry anymore. Reason number 10 was the foundation that made everything else inevitable. But the foundation was just the beginning. Reason number 9. Berry Gordy controlled who they could be. Berry Gordy built Motown Records into a machine. A legendary, historic, genuinely revolutionary machine. But machines don't care about individual expression, they care about output. And by the early 1970s, the Jackson 5 were becoming one of Motown's most reliable outputs, which meant Berry Gordy had every incentive to keep them exactly as they were. The problem was that Michael Jackson was not the same person at 14 that he had been at 11. His voice was changing, his tastes were evolving. But I do know that I love you. He had started listening to artists far outside the Motown bubble, absorbing influences from funk, from rock, walk around this town with your head all up in the sky, from soul traditions that Gordy's carefully polished pop formula didn't have room for. Michael wanted to grow. He wanted to experiment. And I do know that I want you. He was already beginning to hear in his head the kind of music that would one day become off-the-wall and thriller, layered, genre-defying, let's dance, let's shout, shake your body down to the ground, emotionally complex music that didn't fit neatly into the Motown mold. But every time the brothers tried to push into new creative territory, let's dance, let's shout, shake your body down to the ground, the label pulled them back. Gordy had a formula that worked, why change it? The audience expected the Jackson 5 sound. And Berry Gordy was going to deliver the Jackson 5 sound with or without the group's enthusiasm for it. For Michael specifically, this wasn't just frustrating in the everyday sense of that word, it was genuinely suffocating, because he could hear with perfect, vivid clarity what he was capable of. He could hear it in his sleep. He just wasn't being allowed to reach it. And the longer that continued, the longer the ceiling stayed fixed above his head, the more certain it became that he would eventually have to make a choice between staying comfortable inside someone else's vision and becoming something as extraordinary inside his own. He chose extraordinary, but we are only at 9, and it goes much, much deeper than creative frustration.
If you enjoyed this video, we invite you to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update, and the real stories behind the music that built the world we live in. Don't miss the next one. We will see you there. Back to the countdown.
Reason number 8. His father's management was costing them more than it gave. Joe Jackson is one of the most complicated figures in music history. There is no question that without Joe, his drive, his discipline, his relentless insistence on practice and perfection, the Jackson 5 never make it out of Gary, Indiana. That part of the story is real. Joe saw something in those boys, and he pushed it into existence through sheer force of will. But push hard enough on anything for long enough, and you start to break what you're trying to build. By the time Michael reached his teenage years, the relationship between the brothers and their father had become strained in ways that the choreographed smiles on TV couldn't hide. Joe's management style was rooted in fear. Former associates, family members in later interviews, and Michael himself in his own written words described an environment where mistakes were punished harshly and emotional vulnerability was seen as weakness. The rehearsals were grueling. The standards were unforgiving. So high, let our spirits never die. And the line between a father who loved his children and a manager who needed his investment to perform that line had blurred almost completely. In my heart, I feel you are all. For Michael specifically, the psychological weight of living inside that dynamic was enormous and lasting. My brothers create a world. He was the most emotionally sensitive of the brothers by his own admission. A young man who felt things with an intensity that most people never experience. He needed encouragement alongside correction. He needed to know that the person directing his life saw him as a son, not just an asset. What he received instead was pressure relentless. Professional, transactional pressure that followed him from the rehearsal room into his dreams. And here is what made the situation even more suffocating. Joe held both the personal power and the professional power simultaneously. He was negotiating their contracts and shaping their public image, while also being the father whose approval Michael desperately needed. That concentration of authority in one person, a person whose methods caused genuine damage, created a dynamic that Michael would spend the rest of his life working to escape. When he finally separated himself, it was not betrayal, it was survival, plain and simple. Reason number 7. The solo recording showed him what was actually possible. In 1972, while still a fully active member of the Jackson 5, Michael Jackson released his first solo album, Got to Be There. And something happened in the aftermath of that release that nobody at Motown fully anticipated and nobody in the Jackson camp could have predicted with certainty. The record didn't just perform well commercially. It revealed a dimension of feeling in Michael's voice, a depth, a tenderness, a conversational intimacy that the group recordings had never quite been able to capture. Thinking about myself. Because in the group, Michael was always performing as part of something larger. In those first solo sessions, he was simply himself. And himself turned out to be extraordinary in a completely different register. Every minute I get to Be There, Ben Rockin' Robin. These weren't just hits on a chart somewhere, they were evidence, documented, audible,
Stronger, somehow, some way.
undeniable evidence that when Michael was given even a modest amount of creative space to inhabit a song fully, without competing vocal dynamics,
'Cause I gotta keep on
without the high-energy collective presentation of a group performance, something came through that connected with
living. I got the will to survive.
listeners in a way that was genuinely different from anything the Jackson 5 had produced. A vulnerability, an emotional specificity,
Even though I feel so bad.
a sense that the person singing understood exactly what the words meant and had lived inside that feeling before arriving at the microphone.
So bad inside.
Michael heard that difference the moment the playback came through the speakers. More importantly, he felt it. He felt what it meant to stand in front of a microphone and tell a story that belonged entirely to him.
Find a way somehow.
Interpreted entirely through his own artistic instincts in a sonic space that no one else was occupying. No committee approval, no formula to honor, just the song and the voice and the truth between them.
It'll be a long, long time before
Those early solo recordings planted something in Michael Jackson that could never be removed.
somehow nothing's gonna stop.
Because once you have experienced what creation feels like without compromise, once you have heard yourself on tape exactly as you heard yourself in,
Gotta find a way somehow.
your own imagination going back to compromise doesn't feel like humility, it feels like moving backward. And Michael Jackson was constitutionally, profoundly, permanently incapable of moving backward.
Even though you're gone.
Reason number 6, Motown refused to let them write their own music.
We spent the night in Frisco at every kind
This reason is absolutely critical to understanding Michael's eventual departure, and it is consistently underreported in the mainstream telling of this story.
of disco. From that night I kissed our love goodbye.
For the majority of their time signed to Motown Records, the Jackson 5 had virtually no meaningful input into the songs they recorded and released under their name.
This magic music bruised me. That dirty rhythm fools me.
The material was selected by label executives and written by professional songwriters who were employed by, or closely connected to, the Motown machine.
Blaming on the good times. Blaming on the boogie.
The brothers' role in the process was to show up, learn the material that had been chosen for them, deliver it with the energy and precision the label expected, and then move on to the next project. That was the arrangement. Full stop.
Don't blame on the good times. I'm blaming on the
For a 9-year-old Michael, that system was workable. He was a performer at that stage, not yet a songwriter with a developed voice and a catalogue of ideas demanding to be expressed.
blaming on the boogie. That nasty boogie bugs
He absorbed everything in those early sessions, the song structures, the production techniques,
me. But somehow it has drugged me. Spellbound
the relationship between a melody and the emotion it was designed to carry, and he filed all of it away with the kind of photographic creative memory
rhythm gets me on my feet. I changed my life
that would later astonish everyone who worked closely with him. He was watching, he was learning,
completely. I seen the lightning lead me. My
he was building something internally that the system around him didn't yet know existed. By his early teens, he had begun to write his own material.
baby just can't take her eyes off me. I don't blame it.
And what he was producing was genuinely interesting, not fully polished yet, still finding its shape,
On the sunshine. Don't blame it on the moonlight.
but unmistakably alive with personality and perspective and ideas that were his alone. He wanted to record it.
I don't blame it on the sunshine. Don't blame it on the moonlight.
He wanted to see what those ideas sounded like inside a proper studio with real production behind them. Motown's answer was no, or more precisely,
Boogie's got me in a super trance.
the system's answer was no, because the Motown machine ran on its own catalogue and its own relationships with established writers who had been there
I'm full of funky fever. A fire burns inside.
for years, and there was no structural room for a teenager's original compositions, no matter how promising.
The devil's got them to me. Through this dance.
When the Jacksons finally signed with Epic Records, one of the very first things that changed was the creative arrangement.
Magic music bruised me. That dirty rhythm fools me.
A and Michael Jackson responded to that freedom by writing and co-writing some of the most iconic songs in the entire history of popular music. We almost never got any of it. Think about that for a moment before we move forward.
Control my feet. I just can't.
Reason number 5, the move to CBS changed his entire understanding of power. By 1975, the accumulated tension between the Jackson family and Motown Records had reached a point of no return. Joe Jackson had been quietly exploring alternatives for months, holding conversations that the label didn't know about, listening to offers that were being structured very differently from the deal that had defined the family's entire professional existence up to that point. And when CBS Records, through its Epic imprint, finally came to the table with a formal offer, the gap between what Motown was paying and what CBS was prepared to offer was not a small difference. It was a gulf. It was a completely different conception of what the Jacksons were worth and what they deserved to receive. CBS offered something that went beyond the financial numbers, as significant as those numbers were. They offered a substantially higher royalty rate. They offered genuine creative input into their album projects. They offered the realistic possibility of financial independence built over time through fair compensation rather than through the scraps left over after everyone else at the label had taken their share. On paper and in practice, it represented a fundamentally different relationship between an artist and a label, one built on at least the framework of mutual respect rather than pure institutional control. For Michael specifically, what the CBS transition revealed was something that permanently altered his understanding of how the music industry actually worked. The Motown experience had felt like the only world that existed, the only set of rules, the only possible arrangement, the only power structure available to artists like the Jacksons. The CBS move demonstrated with absolute clarity that this was not true. The rules were negotiable. The power could be redistributed. There were labels that would treat artists with more dignity, offer more creative latitude, and compensate them more honestly for what they actually brought to the table. And if those different worlds existed for the group, if the collective could command better treatment by simply choosing a different partner, worlds might exist for him as an individual. The CBS deal didn't end Michael's investment in his brothers overnight, but it blew the ceiling off his imagination. We are exactly halfway, and the remaining 5 reasons live in territory far more personal than contracts and royalty rates. Reason number 4, the image they were selling no longer matched who he was. The Jackson 5 brand was constructed entirely around youth, around joy, around the radiant, uncomplicated, irresistible energy of extraordinarily talented kids who appeared to be having the absolute time of their lives. Every single moment they were in public view. And that brand was genuine once. Those earliest Motown-era performances, the appearances on Ed Sullivan, the first television specials, the initial tours where the crowds were so loud, the brothers could barely hear themselves. The joy in those moments was completely real. Michael was 9 years old. He was performing because standing on a stage in front of thousands of people was the most thrilling, most alive feeling experience imaginable to him. Every second of it was real.
1, 2, 3, baby, you and me, girl.
But Michael Jackson at 17 was a fundamentally different human being from Michael Jackson at 9, and the industry surrounding him had absolutely no interest in acknowledging that evolution publicly.
1, 2, 3, baby.
He was a young man by that point with complicated interior experiences that had no space in the Jackson 5 brand. He had artistic instincts that ran dark and layered and emotionally complex in ways that the choreographed joy of the group's public image couldn't contain. He had a hunger to explore creative and emotional territory, loneliness, longing, the peculiar grief of a childhood spent entirely in public that the Family Act framework had zero capacity to hold. And so he performed the version of himself that was required. Night after night, interview after interview, camera after camera. He delivered the smiling, dancing, effortlessly happy frontman that the label needed and the public expected. But behind that performance, behind those famous eyes that always seemed to be focused on something slightly beyond the immediate moment, was a young man privately grappling with questions about identity and artistic purpose and authenticity that the Jackson 5 structure simply could not address. The longer he maintained that performance, the more exhausting it became. And the more exhausting it became, the more certain he grew that the only path toward honesty, toward being a complete person rather than a brand, ran through separation. The group needed him to stay the same. He could not stop growing. Something had to give.
If you enjoyed this video, we invite you to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. And the real stories behind the music that built the world we live in. Don't miss the next one. We will see you there. Back to the countdown.
Reason number 3, Quincy Jones showed him what the ceiling actually was. Michael Jackson met Quincy Jones in 1977 on the set of the film adaptation of The Wiz, where Michael was cast as the Scarecrow and Quincy had come aboard as the film's music supervisor. It was not a planned collision between two destined collaborators. It was a meeting born out of circumstance, out of proximity, out of the simple fact that two remarkable people ended up in the same creative space at the same moment in time. But what happened in that initial meeting, and in the extended creative conversations that followed over the next several months, would become one of the most consequential artistic partnerships in the entire recorded history of popular music. Quincy Jones represented everything that the Jackson 5 system and everything Michael had ever worked within before had never been. He was a collaborator who genuinely listened, not the performative listening of a label executive calculating commercial viability. The deep, attentive, creatively respectful listening of someone who understood instinctively that the most important thing a producer can do is hear what an artist is actually trying to say. He pushed Michael creatively and consistently harder in some ways than Michael had ever been pushed before, but the pushing came from a place of respect rather than authority. It came from belief rather than financial interest. When Quincy agreed to produce Off the Wall, Michael's first proper post-Jackson 5 solo album released in 1979, the result reordered everything, not just commercially, though selling over 20 million copies is a number that requires no qualification. Artistically, personally, creatively Off the Wall was Michael Jackson hearing himself on record exactly as he had always heard himself in his own private imagination. The arrangements held his ideas instead of constraining them. The sonic space was built around his instincts rather than around a formula someone else had established years earlier. For the first time, the music sounded like him. Once Michael experienced what creation felt like with someone beside him who treated his vision with complete seriousness, returning to any environment where others held final authority over his art became an impossibility he couldn't even consider. Quincy Jones did not pull Michael away from the Jackson 5. He showed Michael in the most visceral and undeniable way possible what he could become when fully free. Reason number 2. There were things he could never say inside the group. This reason lives underneath all the others. Beneath the business decisions and the creative frustrations and the contract disputes and the management tensions, there is something that still doesn't feel fully accounted for when you add all those things together. Something more fundamental. Something that has to do not with what Michael wanted to do professionally, but with who he actually was as a human being, and how much of that person could exist inside the collective framework he had grown up in. Michael Jackson, from a very early age, experienced the world with an emotional and sensory intensity that was genuinely unusual, even among people who are considered highly sensitive. He felt music not as entertainment, not even as art in the conventional sense, but as something closer to a spiritual encounter. He connected with certain songs, with ballads especially, with anything that approached the territory of longing or beauty or unresolved grief in a way that seemed to move through him physically. People who worked alongside him in those early recording years described watching him cry during vocal sessions when a melody reached something inside him. Not from sadness exactly, from the overwhelming experience of feeling something completely. That depth, that openness to being fully moved is ultimately what separated Michael Jackson from every other performer of his generation, and perhaps any generation. It is what made his concerts feel like communal religious experiences rather than entertainment events. It is what made strangers weep watching him dance. But inside the Jackson 5 dynamic, inside the high energy, outward-facing, collective performance machine the group required, that depth had no place and no outlet. There wasn't space for Michael to be still. There wasn't space for him to be fragile. There wasn't space for the version of himself that stayed awake all night, turning a single melody over in his mind, that watched old films studying the way Chaplin's face told stories without a single word, that felt the weight of every note he sang long after the song had ended, that Michael, the most interior, most private, most essential version, could only be expressed fully in solitude, in a recording studio at 2 in the morning with the lights low and no one watching. The separation from the group wasn't just a professional decision. It was the only available path to becoming completely himself. And every record he made afterward was the sound of that self finally breathing open air. Reason number 1.